All right, welcome back for another webinar with Greenwich Consulting. Today we are going to be covering some really important information for you today. We're going to be discussing how to make sure you successfully assemble and submit your application. Today I'm proud to have Lauren Payne with us. We call her LP. She'll be walking you through the process, and in fact she is our senior regulatory analyst, so this is really her strong point right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn it right over to her and we'll go ahead and get started. LP, go ahead and say hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. You may remember me from other webinars. My name is Lauren Payne. I'm the Senior Regulatory Analyst at Greenwich Consulting. I've been doing application development since about 2010, and I really love it. And I love getting to share this information with the broader world, not just like small groups of clients. So thank you for joining us. A big important update. Some of you are probably already aware of some of these changes, but the state has made changes to the application materials. The craft, grower, and transport applications, they should say updated at the bottom of the forms. But then for infuser, the state just released another update to those forms. You don't need to redo the forms. The updated infuser application just changed the word count for the diversity plan. Previously, they had a typo and it said that the word count limit was 25 words when really it should have been 2,500, and that's the only change that we've seen. It will also say updated at the bottom of it, but it doesn't have the date. The state on, I think it was March 2nd, released the new application for infuser. The other two were released about a month ago. For the craft, grower, and transport applications, the big changes that were made about a month ago, there's no more page limit on Exhibit A, and Exhibit M was cut about in half. The page limit was cut in half, and there were a couple of topics that you were supposed to include. They've removed those topics, so it's a broader but shorter exhibit now. So if you've worked on the dispensary applications, keep in mind that everything we're going to talk about today is a little different. So don't just immediately revert to what you remember from the dispensary rules. As far as submission logistics, this is an in-person submission. You can go to Springfield or Chicago, which is really exciting. I've never seen this before, where if you had to be in person, you could go to more than one location. They're open between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. I strongly recommend trying to go a day or two early, and I also strongly recommend going earlier in the day. You're probably going to have to wait in line. It may not be a very comfortable place to wait. Just be prepared for that. Maybe bring a snack or two. When you're prepping for submission, make checklists. Make a big checklist of everything that you want to bring with you to the submission. Don't forget to include your wallet, because there's a strong likelihood they're going to make you show a government issued ID, and it should be unexpired. So it needs to be valid. They may not accept your application without an ID. So really remember to bring your wallet.
LP, before we go on, can you kind of give us a little bit more of a summary of what to expect on submission day? I know you've done this a million times. I've done this a bunch of times, but for someone who's never done this, what should we expect?
It really sort of depends, but I'll give you the basics. You walk in, it's a government building. Usually there's a small office where people are able to sit, but there's not a lot of chairs. And so people end up wandering around the halls. Every once in a while, they'll have an actual overflow room, like a conference room where you can go hang out. And sometimes they give you a number so that you know where you're at in line and you can kind of guess about how long you're going to be stuck waiting. Sometimes you actually physically have to wait in a line. So you can't just wander off and come back. What else? It's a great opportunity to connect with people that are interested in the industry in your area. I strongly recommend chatting with them about their experiences and what their plans are. These are not your competitors, they're your community.
That's a very, very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, LP. These people are going through the same exact process. They've kind of been through over the same hurdles, fell into the same pitfalls. But at the end of the day, these people have probably a lot of information that's useful to use. So might as well start building that community now. Thank you, LP. It's a great point.
All right. We're going to dive right into some submission requirements. I'm sure you're aware that this is mostly a digital submission, which means you have to have USB drives. Get the good ones. You want to make sure that they're going to work. You don't want to get the kind that are from an Amazon store that's based in China and they're 99 cents because they may not actually work when the reviewers plug them in, which could cause you problems. Go to an actual physical store and pick up some at like a electronics office or office supply store, or you can order from one of those websites, an office supply store or a good electronics company. You're also going to need a 9x12 manila envelope that seals. So as you're making your lists of things you need to prepare for, make sure you have at least one of those. Usually it's better to have two. Moving on, we will talk more about what redacted and anonymous means. So don't worry, we're going to get there. But just as far as what you have to physically bring with you, you will need 3 unredacted but specific 3 USB drives that have unredacted but anonymous exhibits, right? So your USB drive will have everything that you wrote, but a few of the exhibits will not have your name. And those exhibits are listed on the application materials, and I'll go through them again. I apologize, that may have been confusing. You need 3 USB drives that have your unredacted application materials on them. You will need 2 USB drives that have redacted application materials. And as I said, we'll talk about that in a little bit. The USB drive needs to have an external label. It's got to have the applicant name and your the label needs to have your applicant name. It also needs to say either R for redacted or UR for unredacted. Make sure that the label is something that's not going to detach from the USB drive. Strongly recommend using tape or a label maker, something like that.
So LP, to be clear, just want to make sure we're communicating everything clearly. So we need a total of 5 USB drives, correct?
Yes, 5.
3 of them. Right, so 5, and then 3 have to be redacted and 2 have to be unredacted. Is that correct?
Flip it. 2 are redacted and 3 are unredacted.
Perfect. 2 unredacted, 3 redacted. And also just another note, make sure you check your USB drives on multiple computers. We've run into a case where we've prepared materials and it worked perfectly fine on a PC, but then we tried to open on the Mac and all of a sudden this version control, or this write protection came on and we weren't able to access it. So do yourselves a favor and check each one of those USB drives on multiple computers.
I want to clarify once more. It's 3 unredacted USB drives and 2 redacted. So that we're all
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Yeah, put together USB drives, take them out, test them in another computer if you can. If you don't have a second computer, you can run over to Kinko's and pay I think it's like a couple dollars per 30 minutes to use their computers and just plug it in and see if it'll work. You want to open up every single exhibit that's on each of your USB drives. I also strongly recommend making at least 1 extra USB drive for each type. So 1 extra unredacted and 1 extra redacted version of the USB drive. You never know what's going to happen when you get there. I also like to bring an extra envelope with an extra cover page. We're going to get to the cover sheet in a minute. But yeah, having an extra set of materials to provide to the state is always helpful in case you drop something in a puddle, or any number of things can happen while you're dashing to submit. Moving on, you will need a 9x12 manila envelope that seals, not just the clasps. It can have the clasps, that's fine, but you really want it to be able to seal. Don't seal it. Even though the application materials tell you on here to seal it, don't seal it. Keep it open. That way, if the state wants to actually look at materials before you submit, you won't have to rip it open. And if they do want it sealed, they'll tell you and you can seal it right then. You need to bring payment. The state wants to get paid. It's a non-refundable $5,000 submission or application fee. If you're a social equity applicant, then it's cut in half and your fee is $2,500 instead of the $5,000.
Now, quick question for you, LP. How are we going to be proving at that moment that we're a social equity applicant? For example, what happens if the counter's like, you don't qualify?
So nobody at the actual submission is going to say yes or no, you're a social equity applicant. but it's self-reported. So you say, hey, I'm applying as a social equity applicant, so my fee is $2,500. Now, once you do that, there's going to be an investigation into all your materials. And when the state reviews everything you've submitted, they may say, hey, we don't see what we need to see here. We're not sure that you're actually a social equity applicant. And they'll send you a document, some sort of letter that says you need X, Y, and Z materials. You'll have 10 days to send them those supportive materials. If they still think you're not a social equity applicant, you can still apply, but you'll have to pay that $2,500 difference in the application fee. So if the state decides you're absolutely not a social equity applicant, you're gonna have to scramble and get that $2,500 to them. I believe you'll have 10 days to do that as well.
Can you discuss that process, that 10-day period that we have to kind of fix things that you kind of brought that up? Can you kind of talk about that a little bit more, LP?
Absolutely. Illinois has been really awesome in that they are willing to allow you to fix pretty much any deficiency. So if you don't dot an I or cross a T, you will get a deficiency notice from them. Sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a letter, sometimes it's both. So keep an eye on everything. They also may call you. They probably won't, but they might. And then from the minute that you get that notification, usually it'll have a date on the email or the letter. You will have 10 calendar days, not business days, 10 calendar days to get together everything that they mentioned that's missing, fix it, and submit it to them. I know 10 days sounds like a pretty decent amount of time, but if they give you like a huge list of tasks, it goes by really fast. So be prepared for that to happen. Check your email, check your mail, make sure that the primary contact and secondary contacts are people who are reliable to let your team know what's going on. But yeah, you'll have 10 days to fix it.
Perfect, thank you.
So your submission envelope is going to include all 5 of your USB drives, the payment, and something called a cover sheet. The state said that they want to have a cover sheet in there. They said that the cover sheet should include your applicant name, your intended location, primary and secondary contact information. So this is where that comes in handy. These are the people that they're going to reach out for the deficiency notices. So you need a primary person and a secondary person, their name, phone number, email address, and mailing address. All of what I just went through is also found on the first page of the application forms. So don't worry, it's easily accessed. And if you have any questions, let us know. Moving on to everybody's favorite topic, anonymity and redaction. So there are 2 different types of things that the state wants to see us when it comes to protecting information. First off, they want certain exhibits to be what they call anonymous. Other states call it de-identified. The idea is that you create the materials from the beginning without including anybody's names. So that is anonymous. Now, redaction is when you have a piece of paper or a document or a material that's already got the name on it, and redaction is when you physically go in and black out that name or identifying piece of information. They're used in 2 different ways. All the materials on all 5 USB drives will be anonymous in certain exhibits. And all, I want to say that again. All 5 USB drives will have certain exhibits that are anonymous. And those exhibits for Craft Grow are A, B, C, D, E, F, H, I, L, and M.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for infuser is the same. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, H, I, L, and M. For transporter, the anonymous exhibits are A, B, C, E, F, I, J. Now on the state application forms on the very first page, they include this information, but they do it backwards. They say these are the exhibits that don't need to be anonymous, which is kind of an annoying way to say it. That's why I wanted to go through that. Go through and write it on your application for your own self so that you're aware of what needs to happen. So that's for anonymous. You can identify, as you're talking about your team and their experience and where they've worked before, the idea is that you need to make sure that the people reviewing the application for those exhibits cannot figure out who your team is and what each principal officer's name or role at their previous job. So you don't want to say they worked at Walgreens, you say they worked at a national chain that's highly regarded for pharmaceuticals. So ways to de-identify or make an exhibit anonymous is to talk about either Principal A or the title, like Director of Security, or facility when you're talking about the actual facility rather than the address. Some people like to refer to their building as the address. Don't do that. Also, Company A could be used instead of Walgreens, but we recommend some specificity. We really like to use the titles of the person for their current role when you're talking about their historic experience, because that gives some specificity. It allows the reviewer to keep track of who you're talking about instead of person A, person B, person C, and it adds some weight to your team's experience rather than just saying Company A. You can say this, this pharmacy that I just described. As we said, any errors will cause a deficiency letter and you'll have 10 days to fix it, which is great. According to the Q&As that the state released, this is the information that should not be included in anonymous exhibits. Names of principal officers or companies, addresses, specific cannabis business names that you've been associated with in the past that principal officers have worked at or have run or owned. And then addresses, email addresses, and don't forget that email addresses often include names. I know that email addresses are also supposed to be not included, but just keep that in the back of your mind as you're trying to keep names out of different materials. It's easy to miss an email address. As far as redaction is concerned, so that was an anonymity. When we talk about redaction, the state wants you to redact private information from 2 of the USB drives. They are using the definition from the Illinois Freedom of Information Act. I'm going to read the definition. I'm also going to place the definition and the link to the definition in the chat box, which should be to the right of your screen. We strongly recommend talking to your lawyer about what the state considers private information, but here is what they say. It means a unique identifier, including a person's social security number, driver's license number, employee ID, biometric identifiers, personal financial information, passwords or other access codes, medical records, home or personal telephone numbers, personal email addresses. So I'm going to read the ones that are actually going to possibly show up in your application materials. For the redacted version, you need to redact social security numbers, driver's license numbers, personal financial information, so like your bank number, for instance, home or personal telephone numbers, personal email addresses, and your home address. Note the use of the word personal there. That does not mean you should redact the phone numbers and email addresses that are corporate. If they belong to your company, they should still appear in the redacted versions. They should not appear in the anonymous versions. I know it's a lot and it's really frustrating, but we'll make sure to give you all the information that you need.
Very much.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so just reminding everyone, this information can be found online, and we will go ahead and provide this information to all of you so that you have it readily available to you. That's what we're here to do. So LP, could you kind of talk to us about the process of actually redacting? For those of us that haven't actually gone through on our computer or software, can you walk us through that process of redaction, what it looks like, what software programs we should be looking to use?
Absolutely. As Dr. Tom said, we put together a little info guide about anonymity and redaction, and we'll send that out to everybody who registered for this webinar. You'll probably get it tomorrow or maybe Monday, but I really want to try and get it to you tomorrow. So if you have a PC, you will need to use Adobe. If you don't have access, like a login to use Adobe, then you can sign up for a trial. I believe it's either a 2-week or a month trial. It's free. You do have to enter in a credit card number, and you have to remember to cancel it before it charges you after the trial period's over. So remember to do that, but you can get a free service from Adobe to help you out with this. If you use a Mac, you can use the Preview app. It's better to use Adobe though, so I strongly recommend trying to get Adobe. If you're handy with Preview, it's what you're familiar with and you know how to do it, then go for it. And if you are using Adobe, one of the key points is after you've gone through and done all of the redaction, you have to do something called remove hidden information. I'm going to copy and paste the link from Adobe's info pages right into the chat box right there. And it tells you how to find and remove that hidden information. That's the final step in redacting. If you don't do that, it may not fully redact all of the information that you're trying to remove. For preview, the way that you do that is you have to export it as a PDF, and that will finalize those redactions, and you won't be able to go back and change or move or find the information some other way. If you're using a preview on a Mac and you do export the PDF to finalize it, make sure you save a copy of the first one too, that allows you to move the boxes around in case you change your mind or you have a problem. Having that original document that you can easily manipulate so you don't have to start from scratch is really helpful. Okay, I think that's everything from anonymity and redaction. What would you like to talk about next, Dr. Tom?
All right, I think we should go ahead and do kind of the funner stuff. I think we should go ahead and just kind of start unloading some of our, or rather your box of magic tricks, your submission and assembly tips and tricks.
Awesome. All right. Also, reminder, there is a chat box here in this window. Feel free to type questions and we will field them as we can. So, submission tips and tricks. As you're drafting materials and uploading scanned documents and receiving documents from your team members, be careful about version control. It's really easy to make a bunch of changes to a document and then lose track of that document and end up grabbing the wrong one when you're trying to create your final product. So use version numbers. We usually put in the file name, the very last part, you put a .v1 for the first one. You make any changes to that document, it becomes v2. Save v1 so that you've got it in case you want to see what changed. But absolutely, like, come up with a numbering system so that you don't submit the wrong version. Also, this is a personal pet peeve. I strongly recommend not using the word final in any of your file names, because as you'll probably see moving forward, nothing's ever final, things constantly change. And the word final ends up becoming like meaningless.
A perfect example of that is when you get your deficiency notice back, right? You might have already named your files final, but now you're gonna have to go back and unfinalize them and find everything that you missed and start polishing up and then rename again. So I just completely agree with LP on that one. No point in that like final.
That's a really great example. Yeah, that would be challenging. You can change the word to submitted. That's a good word once it's actually been submitted. Make a list of each exhibit that identifies which version is most recent. So you've got your list of documents that you've made, and then just say, 2, 3, if it's version, if your exhibit B is on version 3, that way you know that that's the most recent as you're looking through your files to find things. Make sure to do a walkthrough of all your files when you're getting ready to assemble everything, and we're going to talk about like the documents that need to be assembled, but walk through every single page of every single exhibit and look for those things that identify that it's the right version. Like, oh, we changed that particular role to this other role a couple of versions ago, but for some reason we've got the first role in here now. We need to change it back. Yeah, walk through, make sure that you've got everything perfect. Be sure to remember, if you are using GreenRush Consulting's Application Accelerator materials, be sure to remove the headers from the template documents. Don't leave your GreenRush client ID number in the narrative you submit. Everything needs to be in a PDF, or excuse me, everything needs to be in PDF format. You need to have one PDF document per exhibit, and each exhibit should be labeled Exhibit A, Exhibit B, etc. No other words. Don't include version numbers in that submitted form. And then in order to turn narrative documents, if you've been working in a Word processing, you know, like Word Perfect is an old one, but just Word. You have to convert it into a PDF, which you can do on any computer. If you go to File and then Save As, there's a drop-down menu that says .doc as the default, and you can just click on that arrow and it'll open up. One of the options will be RTF, which is rich text file, and another one will be .pdf. Every single document you submit has to be a PDF for this. Once you've assembled all of your individual documents into the exhibit documents, then you're going to have to stamp them with Exhibit A, Exhibit B up near the top of the page. The state didn't tell us where exactly they want it. When we did dispensary with a different agency, they said to put it up in the right-hand corner, so that's some guiding information. But you also have to add page numbers. So Mac users, again, you can use Preview for stamping with Exhibit A and page numbers. The Adobe will also work for this. So this means that you're going to have up to 5 copies of each exhibit. You're going to have the original, unstamped, with no page numbers. That's all assembled together. Then you're going to have the version that's stamped with the page numbers on it, but not finalized. You haven't gone through and either removed hidden information or exported it as a PDF. Then you're going to have the finalized, stamped, page numbers added document that's like the submittable document. And then if the exhibit has identifying information or private information that needs to be redacted for those redacted versions, then you're going to have to go through and redact it, and that will give you 2 more versions. Again, all of this will be on a document that we will send to you, so don't worry if you're not understanding things or you're worried that you're going to miss out. We'll make sure that this is all listed for you. Every page must have a page number on it, which is really annoying. Do it last. You may end up screwing up your page numbering system if you're like, oh, I'm waiting for this document from so-and-so, and I haven't filled this form out, but I think it's 3 pages. Like, don't do that, because things change, things happen, and you'll have to start over again with your page numbering. Wait until you're done and you're ready to submit. Give yourself plenty of time to do it, because it does take more time than you think it does. But yeah, wait to do page numbering until the end.
And also, as you're jumping into doing page numbering, make sure once you're done with all of that, you go back and double check your page length count, right? Sometimes when we adjust the headers or the footers or even the margins, it's going to bump up to another page or create a necessary page break. So once you add those page numbers, do yourself a solid and go back and make sure everything still is under the state identified page limit requirements.
Yes, that is a good point. Although it shouldn't change your page number if you're adding the numbers in Adobe or Preview, but it's still good to check. Make sure every page has the number. Make sure every page says what exhibit it is. Again, stamp it with the Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C up near the top, and then page numbers are best down at the bottom. We strongly recommend using 20 or 22 point font and bold it so that it's very obvious it's not information that's part of the document, so that the reviewers know exactly which exhibit they're looking at and which page they're looking at for the exhibit. Because a lot of your documents may actually have other page numbers on them. So you don't want them confused about which number is related to the application versus which number is related to the form. The state said that they don't have a preference about spacing. So you can use double space if you want. I strongly recommend using single space so that you can use all the space that you're given. With these page limits, you're limited in how much information you can provide. This is like, if you're doing infuser or craft grower, this is a very competitive process. You guys may have noticed how many people are applying, and there's only 40 licenses available for each. So you really want to pack in the information. So I strongly recommend using single space, but you're allowed to do double space. No cover pages. Don't include cover pages. The only time you include a cover page is a physical page in the envelope with your USB drives. That being said, there is this one form. It is page number 3 in the applications. It's called General Information. You may have noticed it. It's 1 page. It's not part of an exhibit. And the instructions say that it's required. It's a required document, but they don't say how to submit it. So my recommendation is going to be to print out a hard copy of it and carry it with you when you submit and say, hey, do you want the hard copy of the general information document? They probably don't want the hard copy, but just that way you're prepared. Also include it in your PDF as a separate, or excuse me, include it with your USB as a separate PDF. So you'll have all of your exhibits listed, plus something called general information, and it's a one-page document with all that information filled out.
So really quick, LP, we had a quick question. I just wanted to confirm the answer. So the question was, let's say we're going to go ahead and add a page, and let's say it's a copy of our driver's license. That page correctly also has to be numbered and stamped, correct?
Yes, that is a great question, and yes, it needs to be numbered and stamped.
Perfect. Thank you very much, LP.
Yeah. Don't forget to send us those questions. All right, moving on. Sorry, I'm going through my notes. Okay, submission tips, just actual physical logistics of submission. Give yourself plenty of time to submit. Also give yourself plenty of time to assemble all these documents. As you can see, you have to stamp them, you have to number them. Things are gonna go wrong. Your computer's gonna crash once or twice. You're gonna lose a version. Like, these are things that happen to us, and we've been doing this for a long time. Everything takes about 3 times longer than you think it will, so be sure to give yourself a lot of buffer. But then when it comes to submission day, when you're ready to submit, you've got all of your USB drives, you've got your check, because it's a cashier's check or a money order. We're going to talk about that in a minute. You've got your money to pay the state because they care about that stuff. Give yourself plenty of time. Get there early. Give yourself, like, assume that the traffic's going to be awful and that you're going to take forever to find parking. If you can afford it, I strongly recommend taking either a taxi cab or a ride share to get, or even mass transit. You don't have to carry physical binders, so that's awesome. You can take mass transit to at least the Chicago location. I don't know about Springfield, but that way you don't have to fuss with parking because you don't want to get a ticket while you're dealing with all of this other expensive stuff. Try and submit a day or 2 early. They will be closed on the 1st. Oh, this is, I'm sorry. That's from dispensary. That's an old note. Sorry about that. But yeah, try and submit early, and remember that they're open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., not 9 a.m. So you can get there super early if you'd like to. If you go a few days early, like before the 16th, and there's something missing when you hand it in and they're like, oh, you're missing this item, that'll give you a little time to run and fix it rather than having to scramble that day to fix the problem. When you're submitting, ask some questions. Write them down in advance so you don't forget what they are. Ask them questions. You can ask them anything. They may not be able to give you the answer, but it's worth the shot to try and get some information out of them. Ask them things like, how long do you think this is going to be? How many people have you seen already? How many people do you expect to submit total? Yeah, anything that you'd like to know about this process, either right now, what's happening right now, or what's going to happen in the future, like, it's fair game. And when you get that answer, write it down and send it to us, because we'd love to be able to tell everybody else that's submitting what you've learned. As I mentioned, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, so since we don't need originals for the actual submission, what do we need? Should we be holding onto original documents? Should we, for our own record keeping, what do we do with those, LP?
That's a great question. The originals are not required to submit. You scan them and submit them in the exhibits that are required, but save the originals, because once you get your notification that you are provisionally approved, the state's going to keep doing an investigation and at some point may come back and ask for all of those notarized documents and physical originals. So don't let your team members keep their forms, because they will lose them. Collect them all right away as soon as you can and hang on to them in a safe place so that if the state comes knocking, you're ready. Also, when you get when your team members get fingerprinted, there should be 2 documents, not just 1. There should be the payment receipt and the form that they had to fill out. All right, I think that's the end of my list, which is exciting. So if you guys have questions, please send them out. I do want to let you guys know that The DCEO, I don't remember what that stands for, but it's an Illinois agency. They have opened their lending program. So you can apply for a loan for social equity applicants. And if you get that loan application in soon, they'll actually send you a letter that you can use as part of your proof of capital in your application. So, if you don't have a ton of cash laying around, you can include this letter saying, look, we've applied for our loan and we think that we're going to get it, and this can count towards your capital outlay, which is great. But the state has said that you have to submit those applications as soon as possible to ensure that you get the letter. They said that they will get those letters out before noon on March 16th if you submit your application by March 13th. I think that that's probably unlikely. If you submit on March 13th, they may not get you that letter in time. So do it soon. Get it done in the next 4 or 5 days if you can. And in the emails that we've sent, there are links to that lending program, and I will circulate that link again after this webinar.
Thank you very much, LP. We actually have another question from one of the attendees. How do we handle our fingerprint receipt? Do we have to submit that to the state? Is that part of the documentation we will be providing? What does that look like?
The state's application doesn't actually specifically request it. They just want that form that's part of the application materials filled out. I want you to keep those receipts because there can be problems. And if the state can't find your actual background check that comes to them, or that's supposed to come to them, if they don't get it, at least you have a receipt to prove that you did it. And then you just get fingerprinted again. We've seen that happen several times in several states where people go and get fingerprinted and the state's like, we can't find it. And being able to prove that you did it is really important.
Exactly. Just always hold on to all of your records, because at the end of the day, the burden of proof is always going to be on you, right? So as long as you've maintained all of your originals, you've kept all your receipts, all of your documentation, then you should be fine, especially going back into the deficiency process, should that happen to you. So again, just reiterating what everything LP said, go ahead and save all of your receipts, all of your original documents, keep them yourselves, do not lose them. This is the only thing, this might be your saving grace in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, depending on how this all turns down. Thank you very much, LP. I just kind of wanted to add a little bit other of my own tips to kind of the submission process. In particular, as you're going through redacting items, one of the things you should do is you should keep a list of every single exhibit that needs to be redacted. Not only every single exhibit, but make sure that list includes page numbers for where it needs to be redacted, right? That way you have a final quality control list. You can go through and spot check everything, make sure you've caught everything. Also, when you're lining up your references, let's say you point to something else in another exhibit, make sure those references are lined up after you insert the page numbers, right? When you do all of your final formatting, one of the things that I noticed is that page numbers will shift around a little bit. So make sure one of the last things you do is go back and actually identify in your narrative that all of your references to page numbers are still accurate, right? One of the things you don't want to do is point to a page that is inaccurate or in any way give any reviewer a reason to lower your score. So make sure all of your ideas are lined up perfectly. LP, anything to add to that?
I do. I have a better way of handling the page number problem. Don't reference page numbers. Say it's an exhibit B and it's in this subsection. Use the header that's there and just leave a page number out of it so you don't have to deal with it. That's how I do it.
I actually agree. Totally agree. Don't if you don't have to put the page number, don't in. It's one of those processes where you don't necessarily need to give them too much information so you don't end up shooting yourself in the foot. But if you do end up using page numbers, again, just make sure they're lined up perfectly and they're absolutely accurate. Or better yet, take LP's advice and just point to the subsection or the exhibit itself in general. Anything else, LP?
I think that's it, but I'm happy to answer questions. You've got us here. Please ask away. We're happy to field whatever you want. I think you're going to get a survey at the end of this webinar asking you what topics you'd like us to cover in the future. I'm pretty sure our webinar for next week has actually been suspended. We will be starting these up again very soon. They will not be necessarily Illinois specific, but they will cover a wide range of topics, including things like building your business plan that's targeted for investors and coming up with a plan to identify your team members and things like that. So keep an eye out. You're already registered with our Zoom program, so you'll receive updates about upcoming webinars.
And of course, if you need any assistance filing your application, go ahead and please give us a call. We have a variety of products and services that we've designed specifically for the Illinois process. So just a reminder, we are to help. We are here to help, right, LP?
Yes, we are. I see that we have a question from Lisa Shin. Now, she's a colleague of mine. She's from the newly formed South and West Side Coalition for Commerce in Illinois, and is also an application development expert. So I'm excited to see she's joined us today. Hi, Lisa. She wants to know more about the location requirements. There aren't very many at the state level. There's basically only the requirement that craft growers can't be too close to one another, and that you have to follow local zoning rules. Now, getting your local zoning approval for your craft grower and or infuser facility can be challenging. There is a form, as I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with. I'm trying to find it. There's a form that you have to get the locals to agree to sign. It doesn't necessarily say that you are approved for local operation. It's just saying that you're not violating anything that currently exists in that location. If you're having trouble getting your city or county to sign that form, please give them our phone number and my name, Lauren Payne, and I'm happy to talk them through what it means and how to do it. There's also an info sheet that's listed on the very first page of the Department of Agriculture website. It's down towards the bottom after the links to the forms and everything else. There is an info sheet specifically for local jurisdictions, the authorities there, if they have questions about what the form means and how to fill it out. But again, GreenRush is happy to help you guys with that stuff. Your local jurisdictions may have very, very strict rules, or they may have none at all.
Wow, now it seems like we're getting actually a bunch more questions. So let's go ahead, LP, and go back to the USB things. We have a question here. Just want to make sure we're confirming everything accurately. We have 5 USB drives. Can you once again break down exactly what the difference between those, the 3 and the 2 are?
Yes, I'm going to look at it so that I make sure I get it right. There are 5 USB drives, absolutely. And 2 of them must be redacted, and 3 are unredacted. So 2 are redacted and 3 are unredacted. And this is found on the very first page of the application forms in case you need to find that information again.
Thank you, LP. And another question we have, it's for the transporter license. If the property has a lease with an FDIC insured loan, would that disqualify the property, or does the letter, sorry about that, everyone, couldn't mute my phone, or mute my phone, but I guess it goes to my laptop. It's going to start over. For the transporter license, if the property has a lease with an FDIC insured loan, does that disqualify the property, or does the letter from the landlord cover that?
Okay, so this is a little complicated. The FDIC thing doesn't really matter one way or the other from what I understand. There are rules that govern banks. So there are 2 things you have to do. You have to make sure that the property owner is okay with cannabis being, grown or sold or processed in that facility. So you have to get a letter signed saying that they understand that that's what's going to happen. Anybody else, the other thing is you have to get anybody else who has an interest in that property. They also have to sign something, and that can include the bank if there's a mortgage. It doesn't matter, and from what I understand about banking law, it does not matter whether or not it's an FDIC insured bank, because banks all have a bunch of federal regulations they have to follow. And the banks are worried that the feds are going to come after them, because at the end of the day, what we're doing, what these licenses allow you to do is still against federal law. And the banks are very skittish about this. Now, you can ask the bank. Technically, the state will allow it. If the bank will sign that document saying that they know it's going to be used for commercial cannabis purposes and they're okay with it, then you're good. But I strongly recommend, if you're talking to the bank, make sure they know that they have to sign something. It's not just them telling you orally that it's okay. But yeah, if you can get them to sign it, then that's wonderful. It doesn't matter if it's an FDIC insured bank.
Thank you, LP. We have one last question, and the question is from Anna. Is it hard to get a Chicago infuser or grower license rather than another city? Well, keep in mind Chicago is going to be a major market. any existing brand that's kind of be coming into Illinois is going to want to target that existing market. So unfortunately, Chicago probably will be more competitive than other cities just due to its size, population, and the fact that it's a metropolitan area. So that's going to be kind of the target. Now, as far as that mean on the state level, are they grading harder? No, it just means that there's going to be maybe higher caliber players trying to target that market, maybe a lot more individuals with more experienced teams, or perhaps more funding behind them. So the competition is really going to come from the people that are choosing to apply in Chicago. It's not that Chicago itself is setting any stricter ordinances or regulations on itself or grading the application differently in any way. That's all up onto the state. But to be practical, yes, it will be a little bit more difficult in the Chicago area, again, just because that is an ideal target market and everyone's going to want to get in there. And we know that each district has their licenses set. Is that correct, LP? Have they identified limitations for craft grower and transport, or rather craft grower or growing infusion in by district or by location, like they did with dispensary?
I'm not familiar with anything like that, no.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything either, but that's one thing we'll confirm. With dispensary, they actually limited the number of retail locations that you could have by, I think it was districts or zones. I'm not sure. We'll go ahead and look into it. We don't think there's anything limited craft grower or infusers from the same thing. So we'll go ahead and provide that information. But to get back to the original question, yes, because it's a metropolitan area, you can go ahead and expect a little bit more competition. So
I think that's the state in their released Q&As, they did 2 batches of question and answer and released some of the answers. I think they actually addressed that question, and we'll make sure that when we email you guys everything else that we've talked about today, that it includes that information about whether or not they're going to limit things based on where you're located. But yeah, as Dr. Tom said, local approval is a piece of this, and the locals are not going to approve every single person that applies.
So another follow-up question that is, what about the possibility of getting a zoning change? Now, from a practical sense, being that the application is due shortly, I'm going to probably say that that's not going to go ahead and work at this moment in particular. But in other applications, we have seen individuals go through the rezoning process or go through a more traditional conditional use permit that allows them to operate under certain restrictions that are bound by the CUP, right? So there are ways around that, but again, from the practical stance, being that the applications are due so quickly, that's probably not going to work for this this instance. LP, do you?
Yeah, I agree. It's too late to get a zoning change. That being said, the only thing that you need to submit to the state on March 16th with respect to all of this is that form that's signed by the locally authorized zoning official. So if you are able to convince your local jurisdiction to go through the process, to start the process of a zoning change, then they might be willing to sign that form for you, in which case you're all set. It still needs to change before you get your actual license from the state. But if you can prove that you're going through the process and the locals are willing to sign that document for you, it might work. Dr. Tom, I can't hear you right now. I don't know if anybody else can.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, one last question, LP. As far as submission goes, do I have to personally be the one, if I'm the owner of the company or the entity, do I personally have to be the one that physically drops the software? Can I hire an agency to do this or send one of my team members or colleagues to do this? How does that work?
Yeah, they, as far as we know, that as long as someone's physically there to submit it, I will, yeah, I see somebody is offering their services for pay to submit for them. I do want to let you know that if you do have somebody submit on your behalf, like that person's name is often what's published in the media for who submitted applications. So what happens is the state gets all of these hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications, and the media is like, who applied? Who applied? We want to know today. And it's like been 12 hours. So what they end up doing is they don't publish the actual names from the forms and from the USB drives. They publish the name of the person who signed in when you submitted. And so I've actually been contacted by the media several times or other people several times because I'm the physical submitter for our clients. And my name is the one that gets released to the media. And then the media says, these 800 people applied. And there's my name with Green Rush Consulting. And so then I get these weird calls from people being like, oh, I see you've applied for a license. So make sure that that person who is going to do it for you understands that.
Thank you very much, LP. And well, we've got a little bit more time, so we'll go ahead and continue fielding questions. We have another one from Elizabeth Vargas. For the transporter license, is the minimum points to win 75%? Yes, according to the regs that have been published, anyone that will score 75% of the total possible points will be awarded a transporter license. Again, there's no cap on this. It is simply just get these 75 points and then you are awarded a license. Correct, LP?
So you're only competing against yourself. 75% of the points. That means you have to do a really great job. It's not easy to get 75% of the points, but since you're not competing, then you have a much better shot of actually getting the license, which is really, it's a great way to enter the market.
Exactly, exactly. And also, LP, so for the manila envelope, should we just put the name of the company, or how do we label that? Yeah, do we address it? Do we want to put a stamp on it? What do we do? What's it look like? Final packaging.
So the application materials say to include the applicant information. I know exactly what Teresa's asking. It says that the applicant name needs to be included. And I think what she's asking is, should it be the company name or the owner's names or what? The applicant name is usually your company name. So I would just include the company name. But when you go so far as to include the primary contact information, that's going to be a person rather than the company. It can't, honestly, I don't think it could hurt to put the person's name as well as the company name.
Thank you, LP. All right, that seems to be all the questions that we have right now. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If you do have any lingering questions, please go ahead and send questions to services@greenrushconsulting.com. Sorry, that's services@greenrushconsulting.com. And we'll go ahead and make sure that they get answered. But till our next webinar, thank you and take care, everyone. LP, go ahead and sign off for us.
I saw one more question that didn't get answered. Lisa had asked about an LOI, whether or not you need documentation, or can you just identify the location? From what I remember, now I haven't looked for this in a little while, from what I remember, you don't actually have to physically submit your lease. You just need to submit those letters saying that it's okay for the property to be used for cannabis purposes. But you better have some sort of LOI or lease or provisional MOU, provisional lease set up because of two reasons. One of them is that form that you have to notarize. It looks like this, and it's got like 17 things that you're agreeing to. One of them says that everything is absolutely true that you've submitted, and when you submit, you're saying that you will have access to that property. As far as you know, you will have access to that property. And so if you don't have something in writing, you may not have access to that property. And the second part is the landlord can hold your feet to the fire. If you don't have something in writing, especially with respect to money, if they realize that your entire application and your entire license is built on you having the lease for that property, they can charge you out, the yang and make you agree to all sorts of things. So get it in writing if at all possible.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely agreed. Any last questions, LP? That's all I think we have right now. I don't see any more. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, thank you very much for everyone attending. On behalf of the entire Greenrush Consulting team, thank you very much. We wish you the best of luck with your application submission process. Please reach out to us if you need any help or any questions answered. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.